a quiet dismissal, a forced smile, and a dream nearly crushed. But when she returned, it wasn't for approval. It was for ownership.
The air carried the faint hum of printers, the soft shuffle of papers, and the low murmur of conversations that seemed to blend into a single, steady rhythm. Everything about the place whispered order, wealth, and control. Through the gleaming doors stepped a woman, her presence quiet yet commanding. She was dressed in a tailored navy suit, her shoes clicking gently against the floor as she walked with measured grace. Her shoulders were squared, her chin slightly lifted, but her eyes, deep and steady, betrayed the weight of both hope and uncertainty. There was dignity in the way she carried herself, an elegance born not of luxury, but of resilience. As she adjusted the folder in her hands, a faint crease formed between her brows. Inside that folder lay months of preparation, countless late nights, and the fragile dream she had nurtured with care. Around her, the bank staff barely glanced up, too consumed by routine to notice the quiet storm walking among them. Yet in that moment, she felt the tension coiling within her chest, an invisible line drawn between fear of rejection and the fragile promise of possibility. She settled into the leather chair across from his desk, smoothing the hem of her suit as if steadying herself. The banker, a middle-aged man with silver-framed glasses, leaned forward with a smile that seemed polished from years of practice, polite, professional, but hollow. His eyes flickered briefly to the clock on the wall before returning to her, already calculating the time this meeting might cost him. She placed the folder on the desk between them with careful precision, as though setting down something fragile. "I want to open a community business," she began, her voice calm but resonant with quiet conviction. "A place that doesn't just serve customers, but provides opportunities, jobs for those overlooked, training for those never given a chance. It's more than profit. It's purpose." The banker nodded mechanically, his pen scratching notes that seemed more for show than genuine interest. She continued, her words measured, but beneath the steady rhythm lay a current of urgency. This dream was not just an idea. It was her lifeline, her answer to years of watching her community struggle. Her hands tightened ever so slightly on the folder. Inside were flawless documents, financial plans, letters of support, evidence of careful preparation. Everything she needed to prove her worth, if only he chose to see it. The banker lifted the folder and began leafing through its contents, the papers rustling faintly under his fingers. His smile lingered on his lips, but it was the kind of smile that stopped at the surface, never touching his eyes. Each page he glanced at seemed less a point of interest and more an obstacle he wished weren't there. He tapped his pen lightly against the desk. "These numbers are ambitious," he remarked, drawing out the word as though it were a flaw. Without looking up, he asked, "Are you certain you can handle this level of responsibility? It's not a small task." The woman's spine straightened, her composure unshaken. though a flicker of pain crossed her features. His words carried the weight of doubt, wrapped in courtesy, a subtle dismissal coated with politeness. He continued, voice measured but edged with condescension. High risks, uncertain returns. The market can be unforgiving. His tone implied inevitability, as though her failure were already written. She folded her hands on her lap, pressing her fingers together to keep them still. Inside, her chest tightened, a mixture of frustration and resolve warring within her. She understood the unspoken meaning behind his words, but she would not let him see her bend, not now, not ever. The banker closed the folder with a soft but final thud, the sound echoing louder in her chest than in the quiet office. He leaned back in his chair, adjusting his tie as though the decision had weighed heavily on him, though his expression betrayed no struggle, only the polished detachment of someone used to saying no. "I'm sorry," he said at last, his voice smooth, practiced, almost sympathetic. "We just can't approve this loan at this time." The words, rehearsed from countless refusals before hers, landed with the sting of inevitability. For a moment, the air between them thickened. She lowered her eyes, gathering the folder from the desk with slow, deliberate movements. Each paper she slid back inside felt like a piece of her dream being folded away, hidden from sight. Her hands did not tremble, her posture did not break, but beneath the calm surface, her heart pressed heavy against her ribs. The weight of disappointment pressed on her shoulders, yet within her gaze lingered something the banker could not name, an ember glowing quietly, refusing to die out. She stood, thanked him politely, and walked toward the sunlight streaming through the tall windows. Outwardly, she appeared defeated. Inwardly, she carried the seed of defiance. Days slipped into weeks, and the woman never returned to the bank's marble floors or its glass-paneled offices. To those who remembered her quiet figure leaving that day, it might have seemed as though her dream had ended there. But outside those walls, something else was stirring. In the community, whispers began to take shape. She was seen boarding buses and flights, traveling to cities where opportunity hid in overlooked corners. She met with people in dimly lit cafes and crowded offices, her voice low but certain. Stacks of files followed her everywhere, blueprints, contracts, figures scribbled in the margins. At night, her phone buzzed with calls that stretched into dawn, conversations filled with determination, strategy, and resolve. No one knew exactly what she was building, but there was a shift in her presence. She walked with a new steadiness, her eyes sharper, her movements more deliberate. The banker's dismissive tone still echoed in her memory, etched like a scar. Yet instead of weakening her, it had hardened something inside. Behind closed doors, pieces were falling into place, and though the world did not yet see it, the woman who once walked out in silence was now quietly writing her own answer, one that no refusal could contain.
Months later, the bank hummed with its familiar rhythm, phones ringing, pens scratching against forms, the steady shuffle of footsteps across marble floors. Sunlight spilled in through the tall glass windows, the same as before, bathing the polished counters in a golden sheen. For the banker, It was just another ordinary afternoon, another string of predictable hours. Until the doors opened.
The minutes stretched like hours as the banker sat at his desk, his pen idle in his hand. From behind the manager's closed door came only muffled voices, the low murmur of negotiations too important for him to hear. His stomach tightened with an unease he could not shake. Then, at last, the door opened. She stepped out, not as the hopeful woman he once dismissed, but as someone transformed. In her hands, she carried a stack of documents, their signatures bold, their authority undeniable. Her chin was high, her expression calm, but in her eyes there burned a steady fire that spoke louder than words. The banker rose instinctively, confusion darkening his face. His gaze darted to the papers, then back to her, and then, like a thunderclap, the truth struck him. She was no longer a customer. She was the owner. Not in part, not in token gesture, but in power. She had become the majority shareholder, the new force that commanded the very institution which once turned her away. The polished marble floors seemed colder beneath his feet. The walls of the bank, once symbols of his control, now belonged to her. The silence around him felt heavy, absolute, final. Their eyes met across the polished floor, a silent collision heavier than any words. The banker's face drained of color, his once assured posture folding inward as though the ground had shifted beneath him. The tidy confidence he had worn like armor just months before was gone, stripped away by the weight of reality standing before him. She did not rush her steps. She stood firm, her presence steady, her breath even. There was no triumph carved into her expression, no gloating smirk. Instead, she carried herself with the same quiet dignity she had brought into his office on that first day, only now it was sharpened by power, unshakable and undeniable. Her voice, when it came, was soft, but filled the room like thunder. "You told me I couldn't handle responsibility," she said, her words precise, measured. She let the silence linger before adding, "Now I am responsible for this entire bank." No anger, no bitterness, just truth. The banker's lips parted as if to respond, but nothing came. He sat frozen, his authority crumbling into irrelevance. She turned then, walking away with unhurried grace. Each step echoed the irony he could no longer ignore. His prejudice had not only failed to stop her, it had fueled her rise. As the doors of the bank closed behind her, the air seemed to shift. What had once been a place of rejection now stood as a monument to her resilience. Her victory was more than a personal triumph. It was a statement, a truth carved into stone for all who dared to doubt. She had walked in months ago with hope trembling in her chest, only to be dismissed as unworthy. But what the banker failed to see was that beneath her calm exterior lay a will too fierce to be broken. His refusal had not ended her dream, it had ignited it. Her story was no longer just about business or ownership. It was about defiance against quiet prejudice, about proving that strength cannot be measured by another's narrow vision. Those once overlooked, underestimated, or denied, often carry within them the power to reshape entire institutions. And in her rise, there was a deeper lesson. True power does not come from shutting doors, but from opening them, for oneself and for others. When doors close unfairly, do not despair. Sometimes it means you are destined to build the house that holds the keys. Her fire had not only survived, it had become a beacon.